I'm Whitney, 32, and I just purchased my dream 5 Numler ranch in Montana last spring. 10 years of hard work in real estate finally paid off. Growing up with a controlling mother wasn't easy, but I built my own success despite her disapproval. Family Thanksgiving has always been mandatory in our household, no exceptions. So when my mother's text appeared on my phone saying I wasn't welcome this year, my heart dropped. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turned this painful exclusion into the most memorable Thanksgiving of my life. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where appearances mattered more than anything else to my mother, Linda. Our house was always spotless, our clothes perfectly pressed, and our family portrait hanging in the living room showed 4 smiling children and 2 proud parents. But behind that perfect image was my mother's iron grip on every aspect of our lives. My father, Robert, was a kind man who worked long hours at his accounting firm. He avoided confrontation at all costs, stepping back whenever my mother's controlling nature surfaced. This passive approach left us kids to navigate her unpredictable moods and strict rules without much protection. I'm the second oldest of 4 siblings. My older brother Jackson was always the golden child. 3 years older than me, he followed every path my mother laid out. Went to her choice of college, studied business like she wanted, married a woman she approved of, and now works at a prestigious firm in Minneapolis. My mother beams with pride whenever she mentions his name. My younger sister Allison is the peacemaker, always trying to smooth things over when tensions rise. 2 years younger than me, she learned early on to stay under the radar and keep everyone happy. She married her high school sweetheart and lives just 20 minutes from our parents, visiting multiple times a week with her 2 children. Ethan, my youngest brother, plays the role of mediator. He's 5 years younger and has mastered the art of seeing all sides while never fully committing to any. He still lives in Minneapolis too, working as a teacher and somehow maintaining decent relationships with everyone. Family gatherings in our household weren't just get-togethers, they were carefully orchestrated performances directed by my mother. She used these events to showcase her perfect family, but also as power plays. Who sat where? Who brought what dish? Who received the most attention? Everything had significance and consequences. When I turned 23, I made a decision that would forever change my relationship with my mother. Instead of following her plans for me to settle down in Minneapolis with a nice local boy, I packed my bags and moved to Montana. I had fallen in love with the mountains during a college trip and felt drawn to the open spaces and freedom they represented. "You're throwing your life away," my mother said when I told her my plans. "What kind of career can you possibly build out in the middle of nowhere?" But I was determined. I had saved enough from my part-time jobs through college to rent a small apartment, and I had secured an entry-level position at a local real estate agency. My mother predicted I'd come crawling back within 6 months. That was almost 10 years ago. Those early years weren't easy. I worked longer hours than anyone else at the agency, took night classes to get additional certifications, and lived on a tight budget. But I discovered I had a natural talent for real estate. I understood what people were looking for in a home, and I knew how to help them find it. Within 3 years, I had become the top-selling agent at the firm. By 28, I had started my own real estate investment company, focusing on renovating neglected properties in up-and-coming areas. Each success led to another opportunity, and my reputation grew throughout the region. Meanwhile, my mother continued to downplay my achievements during our increasingly infrequent phone calls. "That's nice, dear, but when are you going to settle down and start a family? Jackson already has 2 children, you know." Last spring, after years of saving and strategic investments, I finally purchased the property I had dreamed of since moving to Montana. A stunning 120-acre ranch with mountain views, a renovated farmhouse, and several outbuildings, including a beautiful rustic barn. At $5 million, it was my biggest investment yet, but one I had worked incredibly hard for and could comfortably afford. When I shared photos of the ranch in our family group chat, the responses were telling. Jackson sent a thumbs-up emoji. Allison wrote, "Pretty." Ethan asked some genuine questions about the property. My father said he was proud of me. My mother simply wrote, "Seems excessive for one person." Throughout the years, Thanksgiving remained the one holiday I always returned home for despite the tension. My mother would make passive-aggressive comments about my career choice, my single status, or my expensive taste, but I endured it to maintain family connections. Never did I imagine she would actually exclude me entirely. As I settled into my new ranch and established my life there, I often thought about hosting family gatherings in this beautiful space. The large dining room could easily seat 20 people, and the barn could be transformed for larger events. I pictured my nieces and nephews running around the property, family meals on the patio overlooking the mountains, and maybe even my mother finally acknowledging that I had built something worthwhile. Little did I know how quickly that dream would transform into something completely different. October was winding down, and I had already started planning for the holiday season. This would be my first Thanksgiving and Christmas at the ranch, and I was excited about the possibilities. I'd been browsing Pinterest for decoration ideas and researching local caterers who could help with a family meal if I decided to invite everyone to Montana instead of flying back to Minneapolis. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee on my porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. "Whitney, we've decided to do Thanksgiving differently this year. We're keeping it small, just immediate family at Jackson's new house. We think it's best if you skip this year. We need a break from your showing off. You can come for Christmas if you want." I nearly spilled my coffee as I read the message. Immediate family excluded me. And showing off, was she referring to my ranch, my success? I read the message 3 more times, trying to make sense of it. With shaking hands, I called her, needing to hear her explain this directly. "Mother, what do you mean I'm not invited to Thanksgiving? I am immediate family." Her voice was cool and detached. "Whitney, every time you visit, all you talk about is your business and your expensive new ranch. It makes everyone else feel bad about their lives. Jackson just bought his new house, and it's important we celebrate that without you overshadowing him again." "Overshadowing him? I've never tried to do that. I'm just sharing my life like everyone else does." "Well, that's not how it comes across. Besides, you're all the way in Montana now. You've made your choice to be separate from this family. Sometimes that means missing out on family events." The conversation continued for another few minutes, but it was clear her mind was made up. When I hung up, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I sat on my porch looking out at my beautiful property through tears, feeling suddenly very alone. My best friend Samantha came over that evening after I called her sobbing. She found me curled up on my couch, surrounded by tissues. "I don't understand," I told her, my voice hoarse from crying. "I've always gone home for Thanksgiving. It's the one tradition I've never missed, even when things were tense." "Have you talked to your siblings?" Sam asked, handing me a glass of water. That was when another painful realization hit me. They must have known about this decision before I did. I checked our family group chat and saw no recent messages suggesting they might be talking in a separate thread without me. I decided to reach out to each of them individually, starting with Jackson. His response was predictably dismissive. "Mom thinks it's best this way. You know how she gets when she feels like her authority is being challenged. Just go with it this year." Allison was more sympathetic, but equally unhelpful. "I'm so sorry, Whitney. I told Mom it wasn't fair, but I can't change her mind once it's made up. We'll miss you, though." Ethan tried to play both sides. "This sucks, sis. I don't agree with it, but I also don't want to make Thanksgiving even more dramatic. Can we FaceTime you during dessert or something?" Through these conversations, I discovered they had planned what my mother called a family-only dinner at Jackson's new house, a modest 4-bedroom in an upscale Minneapolis suburb that he was very proud of. According to Allison, my mother had been gushing about how Jackson had done things the right way by staying close to family. That night, as I processed all this information, I realized what was really happening. This wasn't just about jealousy over my success or my mother feeling like I was showing off. This was about control. For years, I had been the only child who didn't follow her script, who built a life on my own terms. My success threatened the narrative she had created that happiness and prosperity could only come from following her rules. By excluding me from Thanksgiving, she was sending a clear message: defy me and you're out. The realization hurt even more than the exclusion itself. The next morning, I woke up on my couch where I'd fallen asleep crying. Samantha had stayed over and was making coffee in the kitchen. I walked in feeling emotionally exhausted, but also strangely hollow, like I'd cried out all my feelings, and now there was just emptiness. "You look terrible," Sam said, handing me a mug. "Thanks," I replied, attempting a weak smile. "So what are you going to do?" "Fly home anyway and crash their party. Sit here alone feeling sorry for yourself." I took a sip of coffee and looked around my beautiful kitchen. Custom cabinets, marble countertops, high-end appliances I'd carefully selected. Then through the window at the mountains beyond my property. All of this I had built myself. "Neither," I said, feeling something shift inside me. "I'm done letting my mother decide when and how I get to be part of this family." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "I know that look. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I have a gorgeous ranch with plenty of space. I'm thinking that Thanksgiving is about gratitude and togetherness. And I'm thinking that my mother doesn't get to be the only one who decides who gathers where for holidays." "Go on," Sam said, a smile spreading across her face. "If I can't go to Thanksgiving, I'll create my own Thanksgiving. Right here." That afternoon, I sat at my dining room table with a notebook making a comprehensive guest list. My extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides of the family, friends from Montana and college buddies who might be willing to travel, colleagues, neighbors, even clients I'd grown close to over the years. I picked up my phone and started with a call to my father's sister, Aunt Judith. "Whitney." "What a lovely surprise," she answered warmly. "Aunt Judith, I'm calling because I'm hosting Thanksgiving at my ranch this year, and I'd love for you and Uncle Dan to come." "Oh," she sounded confused. "I thought your mother was doing Thanksgiving at Jackson's this year." "She is having a gathering there," I said carefully. "But I've decided to host my own celebration here in Montana. I'd really love to show you the ranch, and it would mean so much to have you here." "Well, we haven't made any firm plans yet. Let me talk to Dan and get back to you." I made similar calls to my other aunts and uncles, my cousins, and even my grandmother on my father's side. I was careful not to mention being excluded from the family dinner, simply saying I had decided to host at my ranch this year. I also called my father privately. "Dad, I know Mom is organizing Thanksgiving at Jackson's, and I understand if you need to be there. But I wanted you to know you're welcome here too, even if it's just for part of the weekend." There was a long pause before he said, "Let me see what I can do, sweetheart." With my family calls made, I reached out to friends next. Samantha immediately committed to helping me organize everything. 3 of my college roommates were excited about the chance to see my new place. Neighbors I'd become friendly with were delighted by the invitation. I decided this wouldn't just be any Thanksgiving dinner, it would be a full experience. I hired a local catering company known for their farm-to-table cuisine. I arranged for a talented decorator to transform my barn into a magical dining space. I planned activities throughout the weekend for guests who wanted to stay longer. Horseback riding, hiking, a bonfire night. But most importantly, I decided to make gratitude the centerpiece of the event. Not showing off my property or my success, but celebrating connection and appreciation. I ordered handmade journals as gifts for each guest, planned a gratitude circle before dinner, and designed a thankful tree where people could hang notes about what they were grateful for. I intentionally avoided posting anything about my plans on social media. This wasn't about creating envy or proving anything to anyone. It was about creating something meaningful from a painful situation. Within a few days, the first RSVPs started coming in. My cousin Tyler and his wife were excited to bring their children. My father's brother and his family confirmed they could make it. College friends began booking flights. Each positive response felt like a small healing for the wound my mother's exclusion had created. The following week, my phone started ringing more frequently. Word had spread through the family network about my alternative Thanksgiving celebration. Aunt Judith called back first. "Whitney, I've been thinking about your invitation. Dan and I would love to come to Montana for Thanksgiving." That's wonderful. I can't wait to see you both. There was a pause before she continued. Your mother called me yesterday. She seemed upset that you're hosting a competing Thanksgiving. She asked if we were going to Jackson's. What did you tell her? I asked, my heart racing. I told her we'd already committed to your event. To be honest, Dan and I have wanted to visit Montana for years, and this seems like the perfect opportunity. Similar conversations followed with other relatives. My cousin Megan called to tell me she and her husband would be coming to my ranch instead of Jackson's. My uncle from my mother's side texted that he and his family were looking forward to seeing Montana. Even my father's mother, who rarely traveled anymore, arranged for my cousin to drive her to my ranch. Then came the call I had been both expecting and dreading. My mother's name flashed on my phone screen 3 days after I had started sending invitations. What do you think you're doing? She demanded without even a greeting. Hello to you too, Mom, I replied, working to keep my voice steady. Don't play innocent. You're deliberately trying to sabotage our family Thanksgiving because you're upset about not being invited. I took a deep breath. I'm not sabotaging anything. You made it clear I'm not welcome at your Thanksgiving, so I decided to host my own celebration. By stealing our guests, half the family is now saying they're going to your event instead. I simply extended invitations. Everyone is free to choose where they want to spend the holiday. The conversation deteriorated from there, with my mother accusing me of being selfish and vindictive. I maintained my composure, repeatedly stating that this wasn't about her, but about creating my own traditions. After my mother's call came one from Jackson. Way to go, Whitney. Mom is absolutely furious. Is this really necessary, creating all this family drama just to prove a point? I'm not trying to create drama. I'm just not willing to sit alone on Thanksgiving when I have a beautiful home I can share with people who actually want to be with me. Allison called next in tears. Mom is having a complete meltdown. She says you're trying to turn the family against her. That's not true, Allison. I haven't said a negative word about Mom to anyone. I've simply invited people to my home for Thanksgiving. As word continued to spread, extended family members started asking uncomfortable questions. My mother's cousin called me directly. Whitney, is it true you weren't invited to the family Thanksgiving? I was careful in my responses, simply saying, Mom decided to keep Thanksgiving small this year at Jackson's, so I'm hosting my own celebration. You're very welcome to join me. The RSVPs continued to mount. What had started as a healing alternative for myself was turning into a major event. By 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I had over 40 confirmed guests, with more still considering. Then came a call that touched me deeply. My father called late one evening. Whitney, I've thought a lot about this. He said, his voice low, as if he didn't want to be overheard. I'm going to come to your Thanksgiving. Really, Dad? What about Mom's dinner? Your mother and I have had some difficult conversations about this. I told her excluding you was wrong and I don't support it. She can host whoever comes to Jackson's, but I'll be in Montana with you. As Thanksgiving approached, the logistics became increasingly complex. My small catering company now needed to prepare for over 50 people. The decorator and I revised plans for the barn to accommodate the larger group. Friends offered to fly in early to help with preparations. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my mother made one last attempt to regain control. She called with a different tone, artificially sweet. Whitney, dear, I've been thinking. Perhaps we were too hasty in our decision. If you'd like to come to Jackson's for Thanksgiving, after all, we could make room for you. I almost laughed at the transparent attempt. Thanks, Mom, but I now have over 50 people coming to my ranch for Thanksgiving. I can't cancel on them. There was a long silence before she said coldly, I see you've made your choice then, and hung up. That evening, both Allison and Ethan called separately to ask if they could come to my Thanksgiving instead. It seemed the guest list for my mother's event was dwindling rapidly. Of course you're welcome, I told them both. This was never about excluding anyone. The day before Thanksgiving, I was in the midst of final preparations when I heard a car coming up my long driveway. Looking out the window, I recognized my mother's SUV immediately and felt my stomach clench. Samantha, who had arrived the previous day to help put a supportive hand on my shoulder. Want me to tell her you're not here? No, I said, squaring my shoulders. I've got this. I stepped out onto my front porch as my mother parked and got out of her car. She looked small somehow, standing there in my driveway, taking in the scale of my ranch with a tight expression. Mom, I said, not moving from the porch. This is a surprise. I needed to see it for myself, she replied, walking toward me. This ranch you've been bragging about. The place that's apparently more important to you than family tradition. I bit back a defensive response. Would you like to come in? She followed me inside, her eyes scanning every detail of my home. The high ceilings, the custom woodwork, the large windows framing mountain views. I could see calculations happening behind her eyes, estimating costs comparing to homes she knew. It's very grand, she said, finally making the word sound like an insult. It's home, I replied simply. Can I offer you some coffee? No, I came to talk sense into you. It's not too late to cancel this event and come to Jackson's tomorrow. Family should be together on Thanksgiving. I agree that family should be together, I said calmly. That's why I invited everyone, including you and Jackson. Her face flushed. You know very well that's not what I meant. You're deliberately trying to upstage Jackson's first time hosting. Mom, this isn't about Jackson. You excluded me from family Thanksgiving. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to respect my decision as your mother. The conversation escalated from there, with my mother employing every manipulation tactic I'd grown up with. Guilt, shame, obligation. But standing in my own home on my own property, something had shifted in me. Her words didn't cut as deeply as they once had. Finally, after nearly an hour of circular arguments, she blurted out the truth. Do you know how many people are coming to Jackson's tomorrow? 7. 7 people. Everyone else is coming here to you. In one move, you've completely undermined my position in this family. And there it was, the real issue. Not my success or showing off, but her fear of losing control, of no longer being the central authority figure who determined family gatherings. I softened slightly, seeing the insecurity behind her anger. Mom, this wasn't about undermining you. It was about not being alone on Thanksgiving when I have so much to share and be grateful for. So now you're the generous one, sharing your wealth with everyone except your own mother. That's not true. You and Jackson are both welcome here tomorrow. There's plenty of room for everyone. She stiffened, drawing herself up. I will not be a guest at my own daughter's charity event. And I won't beg family members to come back to a proper family Thanksgiving either. With that, she turned and walked out, leaving me standing in my kitchen, feeling emotionally drained, but also strangely liberated. For perhaps the first time, I had stood my ground without wavering, without feeling crushed by her disapproval. Later that afternoon, I received separate calls from both Allison and Ethan, asking if they could still come to my Thanksgiving despite the family drama. I assured them they were welcome while maintaining that I wasn't asking them to take sides. As Samantha helped me process the confrontation, she pointed out something important. This isn't about winning against your mom, Whitney. It's about creating something new that reflects who you are and what matters to you. That evening, as we put final touches on the decorations, transforming my barn into a magical dining space with long tables, twinkling lights, and autumn floral arrangements, I realized she was right. This wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about building new traditions around values I believed in: inclusivity, generosity, and genuine gratitude. Standing alone in the decorated barn after everyone had gone to bed, I felt a profound sense of peace despite the family turmoil. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had created something meaningful from a painful situation. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and crisp, with fresh snow dusting the mountains in the distance. I was up before sunrise, watching the light change over my property, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness about the day ahead. The first to arrive were my elderly neighbors, the Johnsons, who had become something like surrogate grandparents to me since I purchased the ranch. Mr. Johnson used a cane, but insisted on helping set up the outdoor fire pits while Mrs. Johnson arranged her homemade pies in my kitchen. This place was meant for gatherings like this, Mrs. Johnson said, looking around at the preparations. We've lived next to this property for 40 years, and I've never seen it so full of life. My father arrived next, earlier than expected, with a rental car full of wine bottles and a tentative smile. There was a moment of awkwardness. He had chosen me over my mother today, something he had rarely done throughout my childhood. The place is even more beautiful than the pictures, he said, giving me a tight hug. I'm proud of you, Whitney. Not just for this, he gestured at the ranch, but for standing up for yourself. As we unloaded the wine, he added quietly, I should have done that for you more often growing up. By 11 o'clock, cars were coming up the driveway steadily. Cousins I hadn't seen in years arrived with their families. My father's brother and his wife brought my grandmother, who exclaimed over everything with delight. College friends who had flown in from across the country gathered on the porch, taking in the mountain views. Allison arrived with her husband and children around noon, looking nervous but relieved when I greeted them warmly. Ethan came shortly after, offering to help wherever needed. Neither mentioned our mother or Jackson. By 2 o'clock, the ranch was filled with over 60 people, a mix of family friends, neighbors, and colleagues. The caterers were busy in the kitchen. The bar was set up in the living room, and people were scattered throughout the house and property, exploring, catching up, making new connections. I had arranged the barn with 6 long tables forming a U shape, allowing everyone to see each other during dinner. Fire pits outside provided warmth for those who wanted fresh air. The mountains visible through the barn's large doors created a stunning natural backdrop. Before dinner, I invited everyone to gather in a circle for a gratitude ritual. One by one, people shared something they were thankful for, ranging from serious reflections on health and relationships to lighthearted appreciation for the excellent bourbon selection. When my turn came, I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. I'm grateful for each of you being here today. A few weeks ago, I faced the prospect of spending Thanksgiving alone, and now I'm surrounded by people I care about in this place that means so much to me. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations or traditions we're born into. It's about connections we nurture and communities we build. Thank you all for being part of my chosen family today. The moment was interrupted by the sound of car doors closing outside. A murmur went through the crowd as Jackson appeared at the barn entrance with his wife and children. The room fell silent as everyone wondered how I would react. I crossed the space and hugged my brother, then his wife, then bent down to greet my niece and nephew. I wasn't sure if we'd be welcome, Jackson said quietly. Family is always welcome here, I replied loud enough for others to hear. Come in, there's plenty of room. The tension broke and the celebration continued. We moved to the tables for the feast. Traditional turkey and ham, but also local specialties prepared by the caterer's side dishes brought by guests and desserts that filled an entire table. Throughout the meal, I watched new connections form between different parts of my life. My college roommate deep in conversation with my cousin, my neighbor showing family photos to my aunt, my colleagues teaching my niece a card game. What had started as an alternative to exclusion had become something more meaningful than I had imagined, a genuine community coming together. Midway through dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Hope you're happy now. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. For once, I wasn't going to let her message pull me away from the present moment and the joy surrounding me. As I looked around at the laughter, conversation, and connection filling my barn, I realized I had created something that wouldn't have existed if I had simply been included in the traditional family Thanksgiving. Sometimes exclusion can be the beginning of something better than inclusion would have been. The day after Thanksgiving, I woke early and made coffee, then bundled up in a warm jacket to sit on my porch. Several guests were staying the weekend, but the house was still quiet as the sun rose over the mountains, illuminating the fresh snow. My phone had been buzzing with messages since yesterday, thank you texts, photos people had taken, and requests for my recipes from the dinner. Best Thanksgiving ever was a common refrain making my heart full, despite the family complications that had led to the event. Aunt Judith joined me on the porch with her own coffee cup. Mind some company? Not at all, I replied, making room on the bench. She settled beside me, looking out at the view. Your mother spent Thanksgiving alone, you know. My stomach tightened. What? But Jackson went to my dinner. Apparently, after he left, the few remaining guests decided not to go without him. Your father was already here. In the end, she told everyone not to bother coming. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Sadness for my mother, guilt that my event had succeeded so completely at the expense of hers, but also a lingering sense that she had created this situation herself. I did invite her, I said quietly. She could have been here with everyone else. I know, Aunt Judith patted my hand. Linda has always needed to be in control. This was a situation she couldn't control, and she didn't know how to handle that. Later that morning, my father and I took a walk around the property. The crisp air and physical movement made it easier to have a difficult conversation. I've enabled your mother's behavior for too long, he admitted as we hiked up a small hill. It was easier to go along with her demands than to challenge them. I'm sorry for how that affected you kids, especially you. Why especially me? He stopped walking, looking out at the mountains. Because you're the most like her. Strong-willed, determined. But you direct those qualities differently. She saw you as a challenge to her authority, while I always saw you as the one most likely to break free and create your own path. I was right. Throughout the weekend, as some guests departed and others stayed, various family members approached me with the same suggestion: make this an annual tradition. My cousin Tyler's wife even suggested Whitney's Montana Thanksgiving should become the new family gathering point. While flattered, I was careful not to make any promises. This weekend had been magical, but I knew there was family healing that needed to happen before any new traditions could be established. On Sunday evening, after most guests had departed, I received a text from my mother. We should talk after the holidays. Simple, not apologetic, but perhaps a small opening. I replied with a similarly brief, I'd like that, leaving the door open without expectations. That night, sitting by the fire with Samantha and the few remaining friends, I reflected on the journey of the past few weeks, from exclusion and hurt to creating something meaningful and community-centered. I realized something important this weekend, I told them. For years, I've measured my worth by my mother's approval, even while defying her. Her exclusion felt like confirmation that I'd failed somehow, even with all my success. But this weekend showed me that her approval was never the true measure of my value. The ranch was never about showing off, I continued. It was about creating a place where I could build the kind of community and connection I always wanted. This Thanksgiving showed me it's working. Looking ahead, I knew the path with my family wouldn't be simple. My mother and I would need to establish new boundaries and patterns of interaction. Some relationships might never be fully healed, but I also knew I had found strength in vulnerability and connection and openness. The greatest gift of this Thanksgiving wasn't the successful event or the family members choosing my celebration over my mother's. It was the freedom I felt from the need for my mother's approval and control. In trying to exclude me from the family narrative, she had inadvertently freed me to write my own story. In the coming months, I plan to use my ranch more intentionally as a gathering place, not to show off my success, but to create more meaningful connections. Perhaps a summer reunion, holiday celebrations, or even opening the space for community events. As we sat around the fire that final evening, Samantha helped hang Christmas lights along the porch railing, the beginning of new holiday traditions in my home. Whatever happened with my family relationships, I knew I had built something valuable here, not just a beautiful property, but a place of welcome and belonging. When someone tries to exclude you from their story, sometimes the best response isn't fighting for inclusion, but recognizing it's time to write your own story, one with a bigger table and a more generous heart. Have you ever had to create your own traditions after being excluded from family events? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through difficult family dynamics. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of creating your own path, share this video with them. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into.